So I'm a member of a few Facebook groups for photographers, and in a couple of them, there has been some recent discussion about the cheapness of real estate agents when it comes to paying for photography. And it's more pronounced in this one group that's geared specifically for real estate photographers. But I see this topic come up pretty often. It's kind of like a cycle, it ebbs and flows, and then it'll die out and come back again. So I wanted to dive in and share some perspective as somebody who's been in both industries and maybe help give some light to this conversation that's been happening online. I think there's actually a ton of similarities between real estate agents and photographers. And the number one is that it is a very low barrier of entry to become either one. How do I know this? Because there are a lot of us. Everybody knows a bunch of photographers and everybody knows a bunch of real estate agents. And if it was difficult to become either one of these things, there would be a lot less of us. Now, that doesn't mean that it's easy to become successful business-wise in either one of these industries, because it's not. But it's easy to become one. Now, because of that factor, every year you have thousands of brand new people who are hopeful and they're excited and they're coming into the industry. And I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing, because oftentimes an individual's first opportunity to flex their entrepreneurial muscle comes by participating in the market as either a first-time real estate agent or a first-time photographer. And I think that's a really healthy thing. But because of that dynamic, the vast majority of both industries, another similarity, are made up of part-time, hobbyists, amateurs. They may be in two-income households, and they are the lesser of the two incomes. That makes up the majority of both photographers and real estate agents. And because of simple economics, if you're in that boat, and that's the reality of the situation, oftentimes the revenue just isn't there to pay for higher end services. As photographers, you know this. Every time that you've gone to check out on some software that you want to buy, if you've ever looked for a discount code before you checked out, then you can probably appreciate how these other entrepreneurs are feeling in a different industry. Now, you're looking for opportunities to cut costs. You're looking for opportunities to mitigate your expenses as much as possible, freebies, whatever it might be. And you're doing this in both industries, especially when you're brand new, because the revenue is just simply not there. Now, the other thing that's really similar between photographers and real estate agents is that the vast majority of us, myself included, when you first start, we're not very good. We don't know a lot. We might know the fundamentals. We don't know how to execute on them. A real estate agent who's brand new is not going to be able to negotiate a contract the way a seasoned professional will. They'll not be able to look for creative opportunities the way a seasoned professional will. They'll not be able to market the way a seasoned professional will. They won't have the network the way a seasoned professional will. And all that applies equally to photographers. And then on the skill side, a photographer who's been in it for a long time is going to take better images than a brand new photographer coming in. And so by nature, that also plays some pricing pressure as well. So imagine you've got brand new agents who are coming into it. They're not very good at what they're doing. So they're selling very few homes. They might sell maybe a couple that year, right, in their first year. Well, because they don't have the revenue, they've got a second job, they're doing something else, and they're really trying to make this work. They're looking for every opportunity that they can to save costs because they want to reinvest into themselves. And photographers, we're the same way. And when we start off brand new, we're not very good. We're not getting paid a lot of money for the work that we're doing. And but that's okay, because the conversation about photographers accepting cheap photo shoots from real estate agents, here's the thing. I don't know your economic situation. If you're a photographer, that $100 that somebody's offering you to go photograph this property, your peers may bemoan you and complain about that. But the thing is, we don't know your economic situation. That $100 to you might mean a lot to you and your family in that moment. Who are we to say to not take that $100. And on the other end, the agent, who knows their situation? It's kind of the same thing. Now, one thing that's really important to understand, let's talk about commissions specifically regarding real estate agents. That piece of the pie gets broken up in a lot of different ways. That agent is not getting 100% of that pie. They've got their broker to pay. They've got maybe a transaction coordinator. They've got other expenses, obviously the marketing expenses, they're paying you. They've got, taxes and things like that. Now, our piece of the pie as photographers, we also have that get broken up. You got taxes, maybe you got an editing team, things like that. But just keep in mind that your piece of the pie is getting broken up, but so is theirs, right? So there can be a little bit of grace on both sides, kind of understanding that. And I think sometimes we forget about that. And the real estate agents might think, okay, I'm going to pay this guy. He's asking $200. It's just going to go right in his pocket. Well, that's not true. In the same vein as the real estate agent saying, hey, man, this piece of the pie, my commission is getting chopped up in all these different ways, and I got to figure out, well, that also applies to photographers. So that's one thing that they can kind of understand and say, hey, look, I understand that this whole $200, whatever it is that I'm going to pay you to photograph this property, I know it's not all going to go in your pocket, right? And so that's another thing that we have in common. With real estate agents, I think one thing that's really important to know as a photographer is that there's a lot of competition to list a property and to get that commission because there are so many real estate agents. The vast majority of them are commodities. It takes time, and there are agents who do a really good job of building their own inner network, and they're great at nurturing their database and getting to the point where they have repeat business. But that doesn't make up the bulk of the photographer or real estate agents. Because remember, we've got real estate agents who are brand new, they're coming in, they don't have that experience yet. And even ones that have been in for a long time, don't always execute very well on that strategy. So when an agent goes to compete to list a property, he might have a handful of other real estate agents that homeowner is also talking to. And when it comes down to negotiation, one of the things that the real estate agent can negotiate on is the size of his commission that he's going to receive for listing that property. And one way that a real estate agent can win that business is by reducing his commission. Now, there are some reasons why that's not always a good idea. Number one, commission for a real estate agent, a third of it's going to be gone to broker's fees, a third of it's going to be set aside for marketing, and a third of it is going to go to feed the family of that real estate agent and cover his bills. So when a homeowner says, hey, could you reduce your commission? Which of those three do you think is going to get cut? The brokers and the fees aren't going to get cut. And that real estate agent's got to feed his family. So what gets cut is the marketing cost. So the homeowner is essentially saying, I will agree to a lesser quality of marketing of my property. They might not know that that's what they're saying, but that's exactly what they're saying. And they're saying, I will agree to you marketing my property to a lesser degree than it could be by giving me a less commission or negotiating a less commission for you. Now, that's where photographers come in, right? Because we're in that piece of pie where that marketing comes out of. So the agents who are doing that to win that business, right? Economic sense, I get it, it's competition. You are now being offered a lower price for your photography, not necessarily because they're being cheapskates, but because the reality of it is that the economic numbers worked out and now they have less budget to pay for marketing because they're not going to cut those other two things. So I think that's something that if you haven't been in the industry as a photographer, if you haven't been in the industry as a real estate agent, you might not be aware of that situation. So in the same vein, you've got photographers who understand this, and they understand, okay, volume is the name of the game in real estate. And you're competing, if you're a solo photographer, against these what are called listing services, right? And these are guys that employ tons of photographers, and they go out there and they shoot these properties. It's really low cost to these agents, and they're doing low cost, and they can survive in that because they're doing volume. So if you're coming in as a photographer brand new to the business and you're looking at the prices being offered to you by some of the agents in your area and you can't wrap your head around it, realize that you're not competing against other photographers who are like you, brand new, solo, starting out. You're competing against a really established, well-run, volume-based photographers who have vehicles for their individuals, their employees who are going out and shooting these homes, and in some cases they're shooting hundreds of properties a month, sometimes more, right? So you're competing against volume-based, and they do great marketing. They're inside the brokerages of these real estate agents, and they're touting their services. Their prices are getting sent and emailed to them. Maybe they're making phone calls to them. So all this stuff is getting marketed to the real estate agents from these photography groups. And so that kind of sets a baseline for what the pricing is. So when you come along and you're like, they're like, nah, I don't want to go with the high volume photographer, but I'd love to give you a crack at it. This would be great. What's your pricing? And then you quote something that's twice of what they've heard here. It's kind of shocking. It can be to them if they're not familiar with like the difference between what you offer and maybe what the listing company offers, right? And now the listing companies, there's a reason that they send high school kids out and basically they're putting a camera in the corner of the house, snapping a few photos, and they just go do that. They're essentially recording what the home looks like. They're not getting lifestyles, quality images, things like that, but that's not what they're being paid to do. They're just, hey, look, I need some photos to go on the MLS really, really quick, and they're doing it at a cheap price. So photographers, you got to realize that they're putting a lot of marketing out there, and that puts some downward pressure on the pricing expectations. Now, there's another thing that I think is important and kind of a similarity between the two is that the reality is there's a short shelf life for photographers and a short shelf life for real estate agents. 2015, when I went full-time, if I think about all the photographers who were doing full-time businesses or on that trajectory, there are very few of them still doing it today. And in real estate, it's the exact same way. You look around your brokerage office, the vast majority of the agents that are in there with you in 7 to 8 years will no longer be in business. It's a short shelf life. And if you're lucky enough to survive that and to come out on the other side with a long-term growth-oriented business, then that's a rare thing in both industries. And so I think that's something that we also need to keep in mind, that the vast majority of photographers and real estate agents in a handful of years won't be in business. So that also places some downward pressure on it because there's the vast majority of both aren't exercising mature businesses with strong revenue growth, right? And so there's always this competition in this race to the bottom in both. So the other thing is real estate agents, if they've been in the industry for a long time, and there's plenty of them that have been in for decades. Now this goes to kind of a human thing that I think is a similarity. And as a photographer, you should, just think about this. If you've been in business for 30 years as a real estate agent and you were paying X amount of dollars for photography, and it's really hard when new photographers come in and they're offering higher prices for their services. It's just a mindset. You get stuck in what you were used to paying. And if you don't believe me, as photographers, think about the last time you went to the gas pump and it was $1 more than you paid last week and what that felt like. If you felt like you were complaining, you didn't like it, it felt unfair, whatever the reasons might be, whatever things that you felt, you can understand a little bit about how some of these older agents who've been in the business for a long time might feel about marketing. And it's just a human thing. Not all of them do this, obviously. Some of them have kind of a more nuanced approach to the rising cost of expenses and things like that. Not everybody does, right? So there's that little inward pressure that happens as well. The other thing is that both agents and photographers, as you move up, if you are an agent and you decide, okay, I'm going to get into this business and I'm selling super cheap mobile homes, it's quick, I'm getting in, I'm a couple $100 commission, it's really not that great, but that's not your goal and you want to get to luxury, right? You're going to leave clients behind. Photographers, you're going to get into the business and you're going to be offering your services relatively cheap because you're really not that good. But over time, you're going to get better. and you're getting paid to practice, which is an incredible thing, right? And I think it's important for both to know that you will leave clients behind as you go into higher price points, and that's okay. You might have one or two that might follow you into one price bracket increase, maybe two, but for the most part, it's not going to happen. And if you're a photographer and you're moving up that price point as your career matures, be okay leaving those clients behind, especially if the percentage of growth that your business is experiencing is outpacing theirs. You can't expect clients whose businesses are growing slower than yours to keep pace with your pricing. Keep that in mind. Now, there's something that's unknown if you're a photographer and have never been in the real estate world. There are some guidelines and rules regarding marketing expenses and third-party companies. Now, there was a time when third-party companies, title companies, would subsidize a portion of the marketing that real estate agents would do on behalf of a property, which would include photography. So the industry kind of got this appetite for artificially low prices of what marketing costs in the first place, because as an agent, you'd come in and they say, hey, cool, half your photography is going to be covered by XYZ company. And then after the transaction, you're going to send it over to them, right? So those kind of things happened a lot. And the guidelines, the legislation, they made some changes and they kind of clamped down on some of that stuff. It's not prevalent anymore the way it was. But there was a time when that appetite was really, really strong. And it was kind of something that was very commonplace. And like I said, it gave real estate agents an artificial appetite for what the actual cost of photography was anyways, because they weren't paying the full amount. And so when that disappeared, those agents are going through that transition period. It was really difficult, right? All of a sudden you're like, okay, I have to cover the full cost of this and it's this now. And then that's where you get those high volume listing companies come in and say, okay, cool. We will keep those prices the same thing that you thought of, but now we want like all your transactions coming to us. And so they went for volume real estate agents, right? And so they're looking and saying, okay, if you're an agent who's doing 20, 30 deals a month, awesome, we want you as a client. And then the brand new agents who are coming in are looking at these high producing agents who are doing tons of transactions, and they're like, who are you using for your business? And they're like, oh, I'm using these guys, and they're only charging me $100 for photos. And that new agent wants to be like that big time agent selling 20, 30 homes a month. And so they're going to try to use the same services that they are, right? So there's that element too that you're also competing against as a photographer, that if you haven't been in the industry, you might not know, and be aware of that. So keep that in mind as well. Maybe you can use that as an opportunity to have those kind of discussions. Now, there are some differences that I think are really, really important. And I think there's one difference in particular that I think favors the real estate agents versus the photographers. Real estate, regarding business, at the end of the day, is all about production. You may come into real estate with a goal of serving your community. You may come into it with the goal of creating a particular lifestyle. You may come into it because you just simply like beautiful homes. But at the end of the day, it's about production. Real estate, on the other hand, photography, on the other hand, it bridges these two worlds that don't exist in real estate. You have the artist who has zero concern for the business, doesn't care if he makes a single dollar ever, he loves the art of it. Then you have the photographers who come in and they're 100% business, 0% art. Then you have photographers like myself who are in the middle somewhere and are trying to figure out a ratio that makes sense for myself, and you're trying to figure out a ratio that makes sense for you. Waters get muddy under bridges, and because we cross that bridge, pricing gets muddy for us. Now, when I say that real estate agents are all about production, how do I know this? Because there are no real estate agents who are listing and selling properties for free, for fun, for creative expression on the weekends. There are a lot of photographers who are taking photos for fun, for free, for creative expression on the weekends. It's a big difference. So as photographers, we have this inbuilt pressure on pricing that just is a function of what our industry is made up of. You've got individuals who don't care about the money and individuals who are all about the money. And that inward tension between those two doesn't exist in the real estate world. And so the photographers who are accepting these cheap jobs, it could be a situation where the guy's like, look, I don't care about making money. I just love taking photos. You know what? Maybe I'm a little lonely and I want to go out on the weekend and take some photos, and that $100 is going to be gas in my car and dinner with me and my girlfriend. Who am I to begrudge that situation? So the photographers who are 100% all about the business, you're competing against that kind of mindset of, I don't really care about the money. I just want to be a photographer and shoot. And if I make a little bit, cool. Here's the thing though. A seasoned photographer who's been in the business for a long time and has moved beyond low price points is not going to care. You're not going to complain. That's not going to affect you at all. I think a lot of the complaining that happens comes from photographers who themselves are at that low tier trying to get that business, and they feel like it's taking food out of their mouths. I don't really see photographers who are seasoned being the ones complaining about that. I don't know. Might be just me. So the other thing that I think real estate agents have a major advantage of, and this is huge, is that they know their numbers. In real estate, there is a database where you can see what your peers are doing, what their production numbers are, and it is a powerful, powerful tool that industry has that we have no equivalent as photographers, and it is an incredible disadvantage to us to not have something similar to this. And let me explain. In real estate, as an agent, you might be able to BS the public with your marketing, but you can't BS your peers, you can't BS the industry. They know who the heavy hitters are. They know who's doing production. And so when they put together these big events and they're inviting big producers onto these stages or to lead masterminds or to do coaching, real estate agents who are brand new or coming into the business, or even if they've been seasoned, they're getting a fantastic education because they're learning from people who actually know what they're talking about and are creating incredible businesses in that moment. We have no equivalent as photographers. As a photographer, you can BS the public, you can BS your peers, and you can BS yourself, and there's no way to tell who's doing what. And there are a lot of photographers who are giving business advice, who have no business giving business advice because they have no business. They have no production. But there is no organizing body where we submit our revenue and our production to that all photographers get access to see who's actually producing and who isn't, who knows what they're talking about, who doesn't. That is a massive benefit to real estate agents. And we're kind of getting off topic of the $100 photo shoot. This is business in general. This is something I wish and I miss so bad about real estate. We don't have any equivalent to that as photographers. And it's kind of a bummer because that leads to a lack of quality education overall for the industry, for us as photographers. And it leaves us without the ability to communicate with those who are actually doing really good production as photographers when it comes to business. And we're left to those who are just really good at making it seem that they do great production. Now, there's a mix. Obviously, there's people that can do both. They can make it seem like they're doing great production. They really are. But that's not always the case, and it's not easy to tell like it is in real estate. Now, I think one other thing that's a major thing in common is that, like I said, in 5 to 7 years, there's a short shelf life to both these industries. You're going to have photographers who today are building businesses, and in 5 to 7 years are not going to be in the industry anymore as a business. When it comes to real estate, the same thing. However, there is one small advantage that I think photographers have in this area. Because we have that spectrum of art to business, you can pick up a camera This, I think, is something that makes it kind of special. You can pick up a camera, you can not make a single dollar your whole life, and live out your whole life and still call yourself a photographer. Still create incredible work and enjoy it and be passionate about it. That's something that we have that real estate agents don't. Nobody is going their whole life not selling a single property, still calling themselves a real estate agent. It doesn't happen. So even though there is a short shelf life for the majority of the businesses on both ends in both industries, there's a lot of money that's still being transacted in that low to mid tier. And like I said, it happens because the vast majority of photographers and the vast majority of real estate agents aren't in it long enough to develop mature businesses that can command those higher revenues and price points. So as photographers, if you've ever gone to purchase a camera and you looked at the top of the line camera and you just really wanted it, but you knew you couldn't afford it because the revenue wasn't there, so you went to second tier, maybe third tier. If you looked at the best software out there and you were totally enamored with it, but you couldn't afford it, so you looked for some free versions or maybe some discount codes or things like that, then you can understand a little bit about the emotions and feelings that real estate agents have when they're also starting their businesses and trying to grow them. At the end of the day, if $100 is going to mean something to a photographer and he says, yeah, I want to take that job, and it makes sense for that real estate agent, I don't think it's a big deal. It's never affected me in my business, and I don't think it affects anybody else's, ultimately. There will be a day, if you stick with this, where if you don't want to do those $100 jobs forever, you don't have to. You can progress and grow to be the kind of real estate photographer that shoots for real estate agents who care about their brand. And there are many real estate agents who say, look, we won't take any properties that don't show well online because it reflects bad on us and our brand, and we have this vision for what this brand is. There are a lot of those real estate agents out there. If you're a photographer and you don't want to do $100 shoots, find those real estate agents, because they are willing to pay for quality photography because it helps their brand, right? You're helping to solve their problem. And then beyond that, I started off shooting a lot of real estate. I really don't do that anymore. Kind of my low tier real estate photo shoots now would be for vacation rental owners. And then the next tier is up. The higher end stuff would be for the interior designers and architect magazines or architects. These things are for publication. They want to win an award. And so they asked me to come in and do some stuff for them, things like that. There's this path of progression that you can go to. And at those levels, your projects are going to, in some cases, exceed commission checks of real estate agents. You don't have to get stuck at those $100 photo shoots if you don't want to. But if that's where you are right now and it makes sense, go for it, man. I'm not going to stop you. Anyways, have a good one, guys. Take care.